Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly terrifying account of a highway hotel night shift. We usually think of hotel jobs as just mundane, right? Maybe a little tiring, but definitely not life-threatening. Well, today we are breaking down the recorded experiences of a young woman who, basically out of sheer financial desperation, took what seemed like a totally harmless night shift job. She had absolutely no idea what kind of horrors were waiting for her in the dark. We're going to use the details from this incident to see exactly how a simple desk job completely spiraled into a literal fight for survival.
Just imagine the profound, creeping isolation described in this quote. Picture yourself sitting there, completely alone in this brightly lit glass lobby, with just pitch-black nothingness all around you outside. This was her psychological baseline. It wasn't just quiet, it was this heavy, almost apocalyptic kind of silence. Setting this tone is absolutely crucial for understanding the crazy psychological and physical events that we're about to get into.
Section 1. The Lonely Night Shift.
So poverty and desperation are exactly why she took the gig in the first place. On paper, it sounds like a breeze, right? Guard the lobby, sit at a computer for 8 hours, do a couple of reports, and set up breakfast. Basically getting paid to just stay awake. But the reality? Total opposite. Sure, inside she had a cozy common area, sofas, a stack of magazines, all that. But because she was the absolute only staff member on duty, with guests sound asleep just 30 feet away, the reality was this incredibly heavy, depressing loneliness. She was basically sitting in a fishbowl, just a locked, transparent glass door separating her bright little island from an impenetrable wall of darkness outside.
Now, the crucial point here is 45 minutes. Why does that number matter? Well, this wasn't some downtown city hotel. It was literally right in the middle of a desolate highway. The nearest petrol pump, which was the absolute closest sign of civilization or help, was a full 45-minute drive away. She was completely and utterly cut off from the rest of the world.
Section 2. First Signs of Dread.
Naturally, it really didn't take long for the psychological toll of all that isolation to kick in. What started out as just sleepy boredom during her first few nights quickly warped into this chilling cycle of paranoia. First, she'd be fighting to stay awake, eyes getting super heavy. Then, out of nowhere, the outside guest bell would ring, jolting her awake. Freaking out that she might anger her boss, she'd grab the keys, rush to the door, and this is where the dread really sets in. She'd look through the transparent glass into the pitch black and nobody. Nothing was there. She basically had to chug strong coffee just to keep her grip on reality.
Things really took a turn when the manager gave her some extra duties. She had to go clean this small, super weirdly designed pool area on the right side of the building. And get this, the whole area was lit by just 4 pathetic 40-watt bulbs shoved in the corners. So right where that weak little pool of light ended, absolute darkness began. It made the boundary wall look terrifyingly far away and completely hid whatever might be lurking just outside the light.
Which leads us to her first real scare. She was bending down, sweeping up some dry leaves near the pool when she noticed something reflecting in the water. A vibrating, coal-black shadow standing right behind her. She spun around so fast she practically fell over, but nothing. Absolutely nothing was there. She checked the water again. Nothing. In sheer panic, she bolted back inside, locked the door, and totally forgot to turn off the outside lights. The morning crew actually made fun of her for it the next day, but man, the terror she felt in that moment was completely real.
Section 3. The Storm and the Shadow.
Up to this point, you could probably just write all this off as fatigue, right? Just a tired brain playing tricks. But that completely went out the window at the 1-month mark. A massive storm that had been all over the local news rolled in, and it plunged this already isolated hotel into a complete graveyard silence. Looking at her timeline, we go from those phantom bells in the first few days to the 1-month mark where the vibe abruptly shifts from just creepy to actively dangerous thanks to a massive power cut. And as we're going to see, this sets a direct trajectory straight to her horrifying final night at 4 months, 3 weeks, and 6 days.
You just have to appreciate the sheer absurdity of her situation during this first major storm. The threat? A generator that had already been busted for 2 days, meaning total darkness. And right in the middle of this blackout, an 18-year-old guest actually calls the front desk to complain that the hot water geyser isn't working, completely oblivious to the fact that the whole building is dark. And her defense against all this? An old, flickering, steel-body watchman's torch from her dad. That was literally her only weapon against the encroaching dark.
Section 4. A terrifying dark encounter.
Seriously, Put yourself in her shoes for a second. The wind from the storm finally dies down, the phone stops ringing, and in that suffocating silence, this new, horrifying sound starts to emerge, a woman groaning, echoing from all the walls. At first, she tried to logic her way out of it, like, is it the wind? Is it just the dry pipes? But the creeping dread set in when she realized, no, these were painful human groans coming from inside the lobby walls, not the storm. And the sound was slowly, steadily inching closer to the front desk.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer horror of what happened next. She shines her flickering steel torch toward the main door, and standing literally 2 feet away is this entity. The details from her account are incredibly specific. A horribly contorted, broken face, pitch-black voids where eyes should be, and this unbearable stench of rot just filling the air. The most chilling part? When the beam of the flashlight hit it, the body began trembling violently, like it was physically reacting to the light. She was completely paralyzed by fear, and it took everything in her to finally break that freeze response and hide behind her computer monitor until morning.
Section 5. The final power outage.
Now you might be wondering, why on earth would she ever go back after that? Well, the grim reality of the job market meant she desperately needed a 6 months experience certificate. If she quit at 4 months, the whole stint wouldn't even count on her resume. Which brings us to the agonizing setup of her final night. She is just days away from her 6-month goal. Another massive storm hits, lightning strikes, and the power dies completely. But this time, she's made a fatal mistake. She left her dad's steel torch out in her car. And to make matters worse, her extra laptop battery was sitting on the sofa in the common area, totally out of reach from the safety of her desk.
So, she is relying entirely on the glow of her laptop screen to keep the darkness at bay. She's sitting there telling herself, okay, as long as the laptop has power, I'm fine. But then, the screen flashes those 3 dreaded words: low battery warning. The spare battery is across the room. She absolutely cannot go outside to her car. She is trapped. And then, the screen abruptly dies, plunging her into pure, suffocating blackness.
So what really happened when that laptop battery died? See, the audio account we're analyzing actually cuts off right there. To understand the terrifying conclusion to this whole incident, we have to step out of our chronological narrative and dig into the actual historical records of this highway hotel.
Section 6. The gruesome hotel history.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how it reframes everything we just learned. She was actually fighting a threat born from a very dark secret that occurred in this exact building exactly 5 years prior. Looking at this incident report from 5 years ago, a female guest staying at the hotel was brutally murdered. The timing? During a massive power outage. The condition of the victim's body? Horribly contorted, broken, and deformed. The prime suspect was actually the night shift staff member, who fled the scene the next day and was never caught. So that deformed, black-eyed entity smelling of rot? It wasn't some random demon. It was the ghost of this brutally murdered guest, trapped in an endless loop of her own horrific death, in the dark. And this brings us to the truly shocking twist of this explainer. The protagonist whose account we've been breaking down this whole time, she didn't actually survive that final night. When the morning staff came in, they found her lifeless body lying on the floor right behind the reception counter. There were no clues, no suspects, zero evidence of a killer ever entering or leaving the building. It just became a completely cold case.
Which leaves us with a deeply unsettling reality to think about. When that laptop battery died, she was left totally alone in the dark with a vengeful entity created by a horrible crime. Did the hotel merely claim another victim in this tragic cycle of violence? Or is the darkness inside that building actually alive? And perhaps the most terrifying question of all for anyone out there desperate for work. Who is going to take the night shift next? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope this breakdown offered a fascinating, if totally terrifying perspective. Catch you next time.